The fall of Rome was a long, arduous process. Slowly watching the empire burn down is very similar to how I feel about Intimidate in VGC. Intimidate used to be at its peak in 2015 when Landorus was dominating the game, destroying everything, and just being one of the best Pokemon of all time. But let's rewind a bit. Let's head back to 2012. In 2012, there wasn't a lot of Intimidate users, but one of the best was a scrappy little Pokemon called Hitmontop. It was mainly used to just create pressure with Fake Out and intimidate the opponents. Now, obviously, Hitmontop continued to be a strong Pokemon until 2013 when Landorus was introduced to the game. Having access to a Pokemon with both U-Turn and Intimidate, the choice became very, very clear on which Pokemon you wanted to use. Now, Landorus became the king of the game, became associated with VGC. It was an icon. It was basically what VGC meant for several years. In 2017, that all changed though when Landorus was banned and Arcanine became the premier Intimidator, performing well throughout the year and being a staple in that format. But then, everything changed when Incineroar was introduced. Incineroar became the greatest Pokemon of all time in my opinion. It won every single world since it's been introduced with Intimidate, and it still doesn't look like it's going to stop. But that might change. In Scarlet and Violet, there's several changes that were made to the ability to Intimidate and how it interacts with the game that have made it almost a luxury in this current format. So let's dive into why Intimidate is not nearly as good as it once was. Now I want to talk about Sword and Shield here because this is where Intimidate really started falling a little bit. Now, in retrospect, these changes are huge and they affect the game greatly to this day, but at the time they weren't seen as such a huge threat. When we first saw the changes to Intimidate, it was kind of shrugged off and seen as a very cool change. Pokemon with the abilities of Own Tempo and Inner Focus would no longer be affected by Intimidate. While a pretty small change, it does become very, very impactful. Pokemon like Dragonite and Mamoswine, who are two Pokemon that are normally not really known for using Inner Focus whatsoever, were now running it on almost every set. Own Tempo became a very real ability because you wouldn't use it because it was mainly used for just avoiding confusion, but that doesn't matter when you can avoid Intimidate on very strong physical attackers. Now these changes were very small, and I don't think they played a large impact on the meta of Sword and Shield, but they were still in the game, and they're starting to show their faces now, currently, as we descend into the Scarlet and Violet meta. The biggest change to Scarlet and Violet was the Clear Amulet. Now, at first, this item does seem pretty good. It's an item to be held by a Pokemon. This clear and sparkling amulet protects the holder from having its stats lowered by moves used against it or by other Pokemon's abilities. Now, this doesn't prevent like Draco Meteor drops or Overheat drops, but it does stop stuff like Icy Wind, Snarl, and Intimidate, which is a huge change to the game. And this item alone is responsible for how weak Intimidate feels currently in the Series 1 format. So at the top, we see a Pokemon like Garchomp. Garchomp has always been very successful, especially in formats without Landorus, but one of the best ways to deal with Garchomp was to intimidate it with Pokemon like Gyarados and Arcanine. In 2017, Garchomp was one of the best Pokemon in the game. I would say the best, but it was very weakened by opposing Arcanine and Gyarados, which were very popular Pokemon, especially Arcanine. And they were just really obnoxious to get through. A lot of the Garchomp ran Swords Dance to deal with this, but nowadays, you don't even need to if you don't want to. You can slap the Clear Amulet on, and now all those Swords Dances you get up are permanent. No one can weaken them. The only way to really slow you down is with a move like Will-O-Wisp or Reflect. But outside of that, Garchomp is not getting weakened and is becoming the most strong and obnoxious Pokemon in the game right now. And it is all thanks to this Clear Amulet item. This item alone is helping make Pokemon extremely viable, such as Gyarados. Gyarados is a great abuser of this item as well. It allows you to spam Dragon Dances without the fear of getting your attack lowered. We're also seeing it used on Pokemon like Ceruledge, which is a Pokemon that was introduced in Scarlet and Violet, who is very susceptible to Intimidate, and is a Pokemon that has become very good because of the bulk up strats with it and just running this item, as it allows you to never get Intimidate and never have to worry about it. It's such a strong and potent item. Obviously, there's not a ton of users of it, but the ones that are abusing this item are performing extremely well and winning some of the biggest tournaments with the Clear Amulet. Now let's take a look at the most recent tournament we had, which was the Limitless 1 tournament. In the top 8 combined, there's only one Intimidate user overall, total. Obviously, there's some screen users, There's a Grimmsnarl in there. There's a lot of other supportive Pokemon, but there's only one Intimidate user, which is Arcanine on Lele's team that was used to place third in the tournament, which is still a good finish for Arcanine. But overall, this is kind of crazy to see. Obviously, in past formats, Incineroar was always very, very dominant, and so it's a little bit crazy to see that. I mean, even in 2017, Arcanine was one of the best Pokemon. So it's really weird to see the fall of Intimidate so heavily. This item alone, and the use of Pokemon like Dragonite and Annihilate, who have access to Defiant, are causing huge problems for Intimidate. It's almost not even working on a majority of players' teams. On the Champions team, the two physical Pokemon on the team are Ceruledge and Dragonite. One has a Clear Amulet, the other has Inner Focus. And this is a trend that you can see throughout most of the teams. Most of the physical attackers are running Clear Amulets or have an ability to ignore it. Obviously, Pokemon like Annihilate getting introduced to the game have had a negative impact on Intimidate as well, just because this Pokemon either has Inner Focus or Defiant, which are both abilities ignore Intimidate, and this Pokemon is very strong right now. It is causing issues, and it is thanks to its ability of Defiant. So now, normally, Annihilate would be a Pokemon very susceptible to Intimidate, but now with Defiant, Arcanine's a joke to it, and it is simply powering it up. Now, obviously, I'm all hating on Intimidate, and I'm saying, oh no, it's so bad, but we're still seeing a ton of Intimidate users in the format. We're seeing Arcanine at a whopping 27% of the teams in that tournament, and Gyarados at 19.56. So together, they're still, roughly averaging close to 50% usage in the whole tournament of having Intimidate. Now, obviously, in Series 12, the last format we played competitively, Incineroar was at a crazy 70% usage. It was a Pokemon that was dominating the game, being so useful and impactful in the game, but obviously, we kind of hit a little bit of a power trough here. Let's talk about Arcanine. Arcanine is probably the best Intimidator in the game right now, and I think it still has a pretty good niche, mainly because of Will-O-Wisp and Snarl. Arcanine, even though Intimidate may not work on physical attackers anymore, Will-O-Wisp still does. Obviously, if Garchomp is running the Clear Amulet item, Will-O-Wisp is going to be able to connect with that and lower the attack stat that way, and Snarl is amazing for special attackers. So while Arcanine isn't as dominant and as broken as it once was in 2017, it is still a very strong Pokemon just purely because of its utility offered by those two moves. You obviously don't even have to run those moves. You can run moves like Helping Hand, you can run Extreme Speed, focus more on that damage with Flare Blitz and Heat Wave and Flamethrower. So there's still a lot of options for Arcanine, but I think you have to be more deliberate in choosing this Pokemon. In 2017, it was a Pokemon that you could just slot onto any team, and it was very potent throughout the game. But nowadays, I think you actually have to use your brain a little bit and put Arcanine on teams where it shines. Now, the other Intimidator of this current series is that of Gyarados. Gyarados is actually a really exceptional Pokemon because it is so good with the Clear Amulet item. It actually ignores the Intimidate from opposing Arcanine and Gyarados and can just set up in your face with Dragon Dance, and it is a great benefactor of the Terra mechanic, as it can now have a physical flying move that it can use on a whim whenever it wants. So Gyarados actually benefits from the item, even though it nerfs Gyarados in a way. It's kind of a huge benefit for Gyarados, though, just because normally the best way to deal with this Pokemon is to constantly intimidate it, and then it feels a little bit bogged down and not useful, because mainly Gyarados needs to set up Dragon Dances to be very scary. So without that, it feels a little bit better, and Gyarados is really prospering in this. I think overall, even though I'm so down on Intimidate, I still think it's a solid item. We could very much get into a cycle of people running Clear Amulet to stop Intimidate, and then since Intimidate is so weak, people stop running Clear Amulet because now they know they're not actually running Intimidate Pokemon. But then the Intimidate Pokemon will start to rise because they know they're not running Clear Amulet anymore, and it could get very confusing and very crazy and hectic very fast. But we'll have to see as time goes on. Obviously, this is still pretty early format. We've only had one tournament so far. We're about to have another. But it's a very interesting development in the current metagame of VGC, because Intimidate is an ability that has been so dominant in the past. So it is very strange and very obscure to see it fall so far down tier lists and utility and even in usage. It's just kind of not the same strength it was. And I think JoeUX9 put it best. The most recent tournament has confirmed in my eyes that Intimidate will never be near as good as it was again, assuming they keep these abilities in Clear Amulet in future installments of Pokemon. And I totally agree. I think that in the future, as long as it stays like this, I think Pokemon like Incineroar will not be as dominant or as necessary to win World Championships like it currently like it was. I think that Incineroar coming back would help save the Intimidate fandom, and also Landorus could help too. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, there's a new item of Clovert Cloak, so Fake Out is a little bit weaker, but currently it's not very used very much, so we'll have to wait and see when Incineroar comes back, if Intimidate can be truly saved. I think Arcanine and Gyarados are doing pretty well, all things considered. It's a hard life to be an Arcanine right now, but I think the utility that both of them provide and the sweeping capabilities of Gyarados do make them viable Pokemon, but it's more about how you're using them and not just spamming Intimidate, which I think is a fantastic thing. I think overall, I would rather Intimidate be weaker. It was a very, very centralizing ability. It was used on so many teams. Basically, if you wanted to win a tournament, you had to run it, or you had to have a really good reason not to. And I think that giving more freedom to team builders is really, really good. I think seeing Grimmsnarl rise is okay. I think people finding creative and more offensive ways to deal with threats instead of just relying on Intimidate is a good thing for the game. I think it grows the game and it grows the team building processes that we currently see. But those are my thoughts on Intimidate and why it just feels like a meh ability. It just isn't the same, and I think it's a very, very interesting development we're seeing. Obviously, we'll have to check in soon and see how Intimidate is going to continue to, will it grow stronger, will it grow weaker? Will we see these cycles that I mentioned? We'll have to wait and see. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please like, comment, subscribe. Helps me out a ton. I hope you guys enjoyed this type of content. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great and amazing day. I'll see you guys next time.